narcissist morons.
We're on.
Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. We're going to start today's show with a quotation which seems to have some fair relevance today with the voting of the Electoral College and the installation of Donald J. Trump as the 45th President of the United States come January, should the world still be here. A prophecy. As democracy is perfected, the office of the president represents more and more closely the inner soul of the people. On some great and glorious day, the plain folks of the land will reach their heart's desire at last, and the White House will be occupied by a downright fool and complex narcissistic moron. It's a quote from, it's actually from Michael Fager, our producer, but he attributes it to H.L. Mencken, the Baltimore Evening Sun, July 26, 1920. And I have no idea who Mencken might have been referring to as a narcissistic moron, but I think there's some practical application of that term today. Again, welcome to Progressive Soup. I have with me...
Hey.
Henry Pietras and Mark Morash, who will be checking out as co-host for a period of time. Henry and the rest of our support group, our Bernie Sanders support group that meets at Panera Bread on Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. for a year and a half now. Mm-hmm. We'll be stepping in to join, and we've got some great guests coming up in January. We've got Deborah Cohen, who's back from Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, scheduled it on the 16th of January. We have on the 23rd. We have candidate for 2nd District, Raheb Ali Brennan, coming back to talk about his campaign and the ups and downs of running a campaign where he spent the entire summer going door to door. All the great things that happen in going door to door, all the great people you meet, in spite of the fact that he came up short in the election. And on January 30th, we've got coming on good friend of the show, new good friend of the show, David Straight, who'll be on talking about how to thin the deer population and the importance of that in order to prevent a mass starvation of deer in Connecticut. And with that, I'll let our good friend, Henry Pietras, begin the discussion and start us off.
Wow. There was, last Wednesday, there was a meeting with the Waterbury group, Janine Lupo and group, and they talked about climate change. So Martha Klein from the Sierra Club and a number of others were discussing next steps that we can take as far as clean energy in Connecticut. One of the things that they're opposing, of course, are the pipelines that are coming through, because the belief is that Connecticut it actually has more than enough natural gas, and the idea of putting in the pipelines is to get it from Pennsylvania over to the seacoast where they can load it on ships and sell it overseas. So the intent is not to provide us with energy, but also to just get access to the water, or so they can ship out. The other thing that's interesting about natural gas is that for years we've been sold on the idea that natural gas is much cheaper, and the reality is at the pump, and I'll quote from experience, okay? My mom just got a fill, and it was $2.99 a gallon, so let's say $3 a gallon. I got my fuel oil, diesel fuel oil, for $2.04 just recently. So roughly $3 to $2, okay, for fuel. But in order to make these equivalent in terms of heat content, you have to take natural gas and multiply by 1.5 so that you get the equivalent BTUs.
Why is that?
Well, because roughly propane is about 80,000 BTUs per gallon.
Okay.
And diesel fuel is about, number two diesel fuel oil is around 140.
So it's more.
Actually, I'm being kind when I say, when I say 50% more. It's actually a lot more. But
almost double.
So
Almost 100% more.
yeah. So that's why we say we take in order to compare, heat to heat from the different sources of fuel, you need to multiply, to make them equivalent. So roughly, natural gas is like $4.50 a gallon.
Relative
compared to
diesel.
Diesel, that's, to be kind, let's say $2.10 a gallon. So
More
2 to 1, okay?
double.
And we're being sold on this idea that natural gas is so much cheaper. All these people are flipping over to natural gas heat and natural hot water, natural gas hot water, and the reality is it's not cheaper. Not only that, but the money that the utilities are collecting, because this is, the infrastructure is actually funded by the utility users, okay? Nobody knows where that money is going. I mean, yeah, it's going to Eversource and other companies, but as to what they do with it for the common good is a big question mark, and that's what we're going to try to explore.
Where does that natural gas come that Eversource is purchasing?
It's coming from Pennsylvania, where fracking is allowed. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that Connecticut has a moratorium on fracking waste. So in Connecticut, you can't bring in fracking waste into Connecticut. That moratorium is due to expire sometime in midsummer. So then, waste from fracking can be brought into Connecticut, and that waste includes all kinds of toxins, poisons, including benzene. And benzene it's poison.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is perhaps having some activities like what we did with the TPP through the towns, going from town to town, getting a petition and getting the town governors governance to oppose, like we did with TPP, to oppose the natural, first of all, getting fuel from natural gas or the expansion of pipelines, but also the prevention or trying to say, hey, do not dump fracking waste here in our town.
Mark, how are we doing with the Trans-Pacific Partnership? How do we do with that?
At the moment, it appears to be dead, which might be the one saving grace of the Trump presidency, because all the others that seem to be potentially possible seem to have gone by the wayside. So at least, the corporations won't get to try themselves for poisoning people, but it sounds like we have plenty of other poisons to be concerned with right in our own backyard at the moment.
But we have a methodology using that process to try to prevent that next step with natural gas here in Connecticut.
There was definitely a good reach out to the powers that be, that there was a strong anti-TPP sentiment here, and I think we've been all learning what the inroads are and what works in terms of how to reach out and how to be visible in those things, because certainly we did see a marked change, be it from what the activities were or from other pressures put upon people, but it'll be interesting to see.
We made a lot of statements and spent a lot of time talking to folks in Connecticut, both on the local level and also on the national level. And who do we make inroads with amongst those people?
I mean, I guess locally, getting Elizabeth Esty to come out against the TPP was rather something. It's very positive. I mean, she put out a very long anti-TPP statement after a lot of input from folks locally. I think also Clay Cope, her opponent, coming out against it, probably had some encouragement there. While it doesn't appear that it's ever going to come up for vote, at least for the time being, it would have been interesting to see how everyone who came out, turned and came out against it, how they would have voted. We won't ever know what the veracity of their stance was prior to the election, but if we hold them to what they said, then I think it shows that we've learned that they can have their minds changed with a decent amount of wisdom set upon them.
Yeah.
How did we do with the other congressional members in Connecticut?
Well, Rosa DeLauro was always against TPP, and let's see, who else?
Courtney
Yep, Courtney was against it.
Courtney was against
and
it.
I guess Himes.
sat on the fence.
Yep,
And still is.
Yeah,
We
still
never got a definitive word on him. I know we spent a lot of time at our monthly Democracy for America meetups, and he was very willing to come in and face what essentially was a firing squad. Our folks were very clearly and vocally harsh on him about that. He never gave us a definitive stance on the issue, but he had the courage at least to come out and face a lot of very angry constituents.
Well, I'm of the mind, as you're saying that, my mind wandered, and I want to thank you, Russian hackers, because President Obama is so caught up in catching you that he has no time to bring TPP up for a vote in the lame duck Congress. So thank you, whoever and wherever you don't exist and are.
Do they exist? What's that?
Yes, I'm sure that out there in the world there are Russians who are hackers. Whether any of them had anything to do with the Russian hackers make me speak in tongues.
Well, who else? Who else could have done the hacking except Russia? We've been told that it was definitely the Russians, led by Vladimir Putin. Who else could have been doing it?
Well, here's the thing. WikiLeaks leaks, hacks, leaks. Leaks come from whistleblowers. They come from insiders. Hacks comes from someone sitting behind a computer and getting through security. So here's the question that I've been asking, if it wasn't them. Russian hackers, the intelligence to be able to get past the security systems of arguably the most important election process in the world, but not intelligent enough to not have more votes tallied than there are people in the precinct? Something doesn't add up here.
That happened in Ohio. That happened in Cuyahoga County, 2004. John Kerry versus George W. Bush, where one precinct, and this came out after the 2004 election. It didn't lead to a statewide recount as it probably should have, but turns out Cuyahoga County, one of the precincts with 638 voters that actually went to the polls, and the vote count was, out of 638 voters, 142 votes for John Kerry for president, 6,800 votes for George W. Bush. 6,800 when 683 people went in the voting booth, and so.
But it's not like in America we count votes in imperial, and in Russia they count votes in metric. It's not. I mean, if you're wise enough to be able to hack the system, I think you're gonna get your numbers correct. It is a farce. It is farcical. Well, I should. You know what? I'm going to take that back. Here in America, maybe we do count votes in imperial.
Oh, as a metric rather than
just as in imperialism.
Yeah.
I have to get my 2 cents in on this one because Mark is an IT guy and I'm an IT guy, okay? And we know that anything IT can be faked. So not just the news, by the way, but you can also fake where you're, where you're communicating from, and you can fake IP addresses, and computers can be taken over via remote control, and on and on and on. So, to point fingers at a particular entity is kind of silly. And especially from the agencies that really messed up on the WMD scenario. Okay, the guys that said, trust us, it's true. And then, we find out that it wasn't. And now, the burden of proof on the agencies that are pointing fingers is huge, okay? They have to do a lot better than just say, okay, it's them and nobody else. Not only that, but the reality is that these acts happened, okay? The acts of election cheating, to be kind, these acts of, getting into systems where people shouldn't. And by the way, if we're so good at IT, how come they got in? Nobody's watching the shop?
Okay, learning moment on Progressive Soup. It sounds really scary when you say it came from a Russian IP address. But you too at home can come from a Russian IP address. There's a piece of software, it's called Tor. You download it. You decide you want to be an IP address from someplace other than your own, and you too can come from a Russian IP address. So when CNN says it came from a Russian IP address, like it came from the swamp, it could have been you. It could have been me. It could have been anybody. It's that simple. Pay no attention.
Okay, again, the burden of proof is on the people that are pointing the finger, okay? Show us the proof, okay? Show us the evidence. And, and not behind secret doors, okay? Because anybody can say anything they want to behind secret doors. Let's keep it in the open. Just like, that's what we wanted with the TPP as well. Keep it out of the dark.
And,
show up.
And on Face the Nation, they tried to bring Bernie into the Russian hacking conversation. He was on, and the first thing they asked him about was the Russian hackers. And he said, the intelligence agencies are saying these things. I feel like we should go forward. Same thing he's been saying, that I'm not going to look back. And what he said was simply that we should let the investigation go forward. And he would not be pulled in to toting the party line of Russian hackers, they caused this, and very shades of WMDs, Iraq, and how we just kind of. So it'll be very interesting to see his stance going forward, but he did very much make a point of not going there.
Yeah, he simply, I watched it too, he simply said, let's see the evidence. So
I got a phone call. I got a phone call here from President-elect Donald Trump.
You did?
I don't know where he got my cell phone number, probably hacked it. But he's asking the rhetorical question, is that woman who's scheduled to be his next wife, who claims she's Russian, is she really Russian? Come on, IT guys, tell. He wants to know, President-elect Donald Trump wants to know, is that woman who proclaims herself to be the granddaughter, 18 years old, the granddaughter of Vladimir Putin, is she really Russian? And how can he tell?
Well,
What? What's Roberto throwing in? Roberto's somewhere in the studio. Roberto Perez,
She's the fat lady.
She's the fat lady? Is she singing?
She's the one that hacked everything.
Okay.
Well,
You guys are going to have to explain that one.
Tell Trump that in the future, every single person will have their own IPv6 address, and will know exactly where everyone comes from. So he can, one, expand broadband to all of the people at this country, and at the same time be able to register everyone and throw everyone out that he wants. So he can do two things at once: expand technology and attempt to be horrible on immigration. So tell him he can make progress here.
He's throwing it back in my lap. He's saying he's been a frequent call-in guest on a show called Basil Budakat Presents! Exclamation point. And he says that how does Basil know that Trump's not a Russian spy?
Here's what he needs to do.
Listen up, Donald.
You need to do what Bernie did.
Yeah.
And you need to go on Saturday Night Live with the character playing you. That was a brilliant moment when Bernie was on there with Larry David as Bernie. And as Bernie said, Larry David did Bernie better than Bernie. So Donald, as your unofficial progressive movement advisor, I expect the millions in my bank account within minutes. You need to go on Saturday Night Live. End the war, which is a learning lesson for you, Donald. End the war and go on Saturday Night Live with Alec Baldwin.
He says he's got to get off the phone. His 12 cats, which by the way are all named Whitey, are in the process of clawing him in the testicles. Let's go back to this whole notion of about fracked gas and the relative value of it versus diesel, or versus solar, versus any of the other sources of energies we have. Well, how bad is fracked gas? Not just the environmental issues, but the cost equation.
We know that natural gas, which is methane, propane, or whatever, is about 80% worse than carbon dioxide in terms of greenhouse emissions. So what the state of Connecticut has been pushing for years now is natural gas because it's so much cleaner. It's not, number one. They also have a directive under the Governor's Council of Climate Change, which I'm a member of, which is to reduce greenhouse emissions by 80% by 2050 over 2001 levels. So we're pushing a technology that effectively makes the problem worse.
Sends it in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So it's counter to what their directive is. Okay. In addition, that infrastructure is being paid for by ratepayers, and rather than investing all this time into putting an infrastructure in place that's going to go away, all right, why not bite the bullet and start putting in clean solutions, be it solar panels, windmills in some cases, whatever, and also take some of that money and put it into research, which ultimately has to be fusion, which is what the sun does. Okay, we need to emulate that. And there are labs, one in Europe, for instance, that all the countries in the world have pooled their money into to create that energy. But from the viewpoint of solar panels, we've got roof space, we've got wasteland, we've got land around the highways that we can use. I mean, in Germany and Europe, they're doing that. Okay, they're putting up solar panels into space that is not going to be used for anything but. We're not going to graze cows, in between, on 84, in between the two sets of lanes, or on the side. We could put solar panels there.
We could put solar panels on top of high tension power lines.
Absolutely. Over the pipelines.
What's the progress that we're making on that? Now we've gone through through what we should do. What kind of progress are we making? Well, New Milford as an example.
Well, the cuddly panda was defeated, and I'm sorry because everyone loves a cuddly panda, but they will not have a power plant. A PPP, like the TPP. They will not have a panda power plant in New Milford because they were going to burn gas.
Natural gas.
And dump their waste probably into the river that was right there.
And what do we do as a group, as a team? What do we do to accomplish them giving up on that?
I think there was the beginning of some very interesting action of folks going to the town meetings that were happening in New Milford, and they rolled over pretty quickly, actually, the town did, because they just didn't want the long, protracted fight to do something with the old brass factory land, which they're eventually going to have to do something with it, but that they realized that the time and energy on that was probably going to, well, between the amount of time that it would take lawyers getting involved, they probably realized that the little bit of the $400,000 over the market value that they were trying to get for the land was probably going to go up in smoke. I was trying to not make the Cheech and Chong reference, but it was I was too far along.
I did a quick calculation on what's needed to replace Panda. And it's quite a bit of land. Okay, we're talking about 8,000 acres of land.
Yeah.
That's about 12 square miles. Okay. But it's not land where it has to be all in one space. It can be land that is not used at all. For instance, we could use the the space along the pipelines that are being built right now. You could use that land for solar power.
And run a line right along them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than the fact that it would be hot, you could make like a corn maze out of your solar panels, and people could go in and try to find their way through.
A little fun to go along with it.
Yes, all these things that can be done.
Yeah, it's just that we're lacking imagination, I think, and also the national will to do this stuff. Well, we have to do it. The sooner the better.
How's Germany doing on this? Because we've talked many times on the show about Germany's efficiency in adapting to solar, for the most part, solar, but also wind power.
Well, we call it clean, because when when the sun doesn't shine, the wind blows.
Yeah.
So they're complementary technologies. Because we still have the issue of energy at night. What do you do at night? You still have to have backup systems.
And that being wind.
Well, and also natural gas and coal and whatever. But over time, as we get better at this, that's going to go away. We'll transition away.
All the fossil fuels will ultimately go away.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen to ExxonMobil? Well, the CEO's got himself a job going forward in the Trump administration. But what's going to happen to ExxonMobil? How are they going to survive? Will they survive?
They're not going to get hurt, first of all, because years ago they've already populated the clean energy space. In many cases, some of these companies are making solar panels. Okay,
so they're making the transition.
Oh yeah.
While they're pretending that the transition doesn't need to be made.
Yep.
So they're ahead of the game. They're talking they're doing the ba 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 of don't need to, while they're doing the, hey, we better do it.
Well, there's still $100 trillion worth of oil in the ground, and they want to make sure that they get every penny of it.
They want to suck it all out while they're and make us pay for it. Get out your big straws, ExxonMobil, because eventually you're going to have to turn them into posts with solar panels on them and windmills at the top.
Yeah, and other technologies as well.
And stop making us to be suckers. And with that, it's been Progressive Soup. We're going to come back and do a second show. Happy Wednesday evening. We'll see you Thursday.